It feels like every day I listen to the radio and I hear that another NRL player, another rugby league player, has been referred to the NRL Integrity Unit. They've done something inappropriate that needs to be investigated, and that's the job of the NRL's Integrity Unit. Now, I know that they pretty much just send emails and hold press conferences, but in my mind, I think of the Integrity Unit as kicking down doors and busting in and seizing computers and phone records and following players around with their kind of like massive long zoom lenses and taking photos of them and like hauling players into the interrogation room and shining the spotlight in their eyes and grilling them with the evidence until they confess. And as I think about this image of the Integrity Unit that I've made up in my mind, I can't help but imagine this type of investigation being targeted at my life. And what would they uncover? It's a pretty frightening thought. Not because I've got anything newsworthy that'd be worth hearing about on the radio, but because I've got moments every day where my actions or my words or my thoughts aren't what I'd like them to be, where they're inconsistent with the person that I want to be. See, the prospect of having my integrity put under the spotlight is scary. And I expect it's the same for you. We all want to have integrity. We want to be known and respected for our integrity. But we also know that at lots of points along the way, our integrity has been compromised. There's decisions that we've made in the heat of the moment. There's words we've spoken that we regret. There's things we've said about someone that we don't want repeated to them. There's commitments we've made that have been unfulfilled. There's pages that we've deleted from our web history, but there's a shame that we can't delete that goes along with it. There's the insecurities that we have in ourselves that we've projected in judgmentalism onto other people. What would the Integrity Unit turn up if it was investigating your life? Well, today we're beginning a new series on the book of 1 Timothy. It's a letter the Apostle Paul is writing to his young apprentice leader, Timothy. It's a letter that's instructing Timothy about how to oversee the church at Ephesus. And it's got lots in it about ministry priorities and how to deal with specific situations that have arisen in the church there. But throughout it all, there's a theme that keeps coming up. And this same theme underlies all these different parts of the letter. And the theme is integrity. Now, what is integrity? What am I talking about when I say integrity? Well, a definition could be integrity is the state of being whole or undivided. So integrity is about having unity and consistency as a person. And so as we look at 1 Timothy, we see that integrity is especially about this unity, this consistency between what we believe and what we do, between our life and the truth. Again and again we see this in the book. Paul tells Timothy to teach things, teach the truth of things, and also to command things, to give instructions about how things should be lived. Here's some examples. Chapter 6, verse 2. These are the things you are to teach and insist on. Chapter 5, verse 7. Give the people these instructions so that no one may be open to blame. Chapter 4, verse 11. Command and teach these things. Chapter 4, verse 16. Timothy's to watch his life and doctrine closely. Paul writes to Timothy and to the Ephesian church in this way because he wants them to have integrity. He wants them to be a church with integrity. And as we think about what it means for us to be a church with integrity, we need to think about these two things together. Honouring God by what we believe and what we do. Integrity, believing and doing. And today, we're starting this series, not at the beginning, where you'd expect, but we're zooming in, that's right, I said zooming in, to right in the middle, to a few verses where Paul explains why he is writing this letter at all. We're going to see there's two main points that Paul's making in these verses, and they are, one, it matters what the church does, and two, it matters what the church believes. Well, we're going to start with point one. It matters what the church does. Turn with me to 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 14. Paul writes, "Although I hope to come to you soon, I'm writing you these instructions so that, if I am delayed, you will know how people ought to conduct themselves in God's household, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and foundation of the truth." Paul is coming. He's on his way, but he might get held up. What is he concerned that they know in the meantime? Well, he wants Timothy to know how people ought to conduct themselves as the church. Because it matters how people conduct themselves as the church. It matters what the church does. The behaviour of the people as the church should reflect the reality of who they are. And notice how privileged that position is of being one of the church. Now, Paul doesn't hold back here. He talks it up. First of all, he says that they are God's household. People in the church are part of God's family. We have an intimacy, a belonging, a privileged position with God. And just like you in your family, the members of your household are those that you care for most deeply, are those that you share most of yourself with, are those that you involve most the time and money and resources, are those that you have the greatest commitment to. We're part of God's household. That's what the church is described as here. And of course, there's just the subtle implication of that being part of this household, we should bear the family resemblance, shouldn't we? We should look like members of the household. Paul also says this is the church of the living God. He's reminding Timothy and the Ephesians that this gathering of people isn't around a silent and still idol, but it's the gathering around the God who lives and is actively at work among them. And through his living word, the sword of the Spirit, they should expect to know God's presence among them as he shapes and transforms them. Thirdly, Paul calls the church the pillar and foundation of the truth. The church has a job to do. It upholds the truth. In all the world, the one place that people should be able to turn to and to find the truth, it's the church. And they shouldn't just be able to come and hear in the church the truth, hear it told or read it from the Bible, although that is a good place to find the truth in the church. But they should come to the church and be able to see the truth in action, in the church's behaviour. There should be consistency, shouldn't there, between the truth that is spoken and the truth that's lived out. Now, what a privilege it is to be part of the church, to be one of God's household, to be the church of the living God, and to be the pillar and foundation of the truth. But at the same time, what a responsibility. Representing God's own family. being a demonstration of God's transforming power and upholding the truth to the world. That's a heavy responsibility, isn't it? You can see why integrity for the church is so important, so necessary in what we do. And when integrity is lacking, when it's missing, why it's such a problem. Let me just illustrate this for you quickly. Imagine how hard it is to hear a message and understand it when it's not being communicated with integrity. So if I'm not speaking in a whole and in a unified way, it can be quite difficult to understand. Imagine that I'm somewhat disintegrated and there are parts of me doing different things. Some things might be distracting, competing for your attention. Maybe some things are giving opposing messages, conflicting with what I'm trying to say, trying to communicate. Maybe some are just undermining me as someone that's worth hearing. Maybe undermining me as a source that can be trusted. All right. Hey, that's enough of you, clown. Back in my imagination. That's a silly illustration, but that's what our lives can be doing. That's how powerful they are to affect our communication. They can be distracting, conflicting, undermining the witness of the church. It matters what the church does. Now, does this make you feel uneasy? Do you feel the weight of this important responsibility? I know I do. In fact, I've been wrestling with this week, and I was even sharing with my Bible study group about how it wasn't sitting well with me. That being conscious of my own failings, the ways that I don't have integrity. And yet I'm the one that still has to get up and up front and teach about having integrity, proclaiming the importance of integrity, and not having perfected it. Just feeling this burden and this kind of inappropriateness of this. But even in the very moment of explaining this to my group, and as they were praying for me, thanks for your prayers, guys, I realised that I was only halfway through thinking about this passage and halfway through the sermon. And that's why the second point is so important. If we just have the first, we end up in this position of realising that we're not good enough for the role we have. So we need to turn now to point 2. It matters what the church believes. Yes, we have a privileged and high calling as the church. Yes, it matters what we do as the church. But to have integrity as the church, we need to be consistent between what we do and what we believe. And it's right at this point that Paul reminds Timothy in the Ephesians of something that's crucial in the church's belief. Have a look with me. Chapter 3, verse 16. Beyond all question, the mystery from which true godliness springs is great. Now, what's the mystery or the secret that God had planned since before the creation of the world, that he has now revealed to the church? What do we believe about true godliness? Well, it's not a what, is it? It's a who. Keep reading. He appeared in the flesh, was vindicated by the Spirit, was seen by angels, was preached among the nations, was believed on in the world, was taken up in glory. Now, this little hymn or creed that's made up of kind of 3 sets of parallel statements. It reminds us who is at the focus of our belief. It's Jesus. It's only Jesus. It's always Jesus. Jesus appeared in the flesh and was vindicated by the Spirit. Flesh and spirit kind of matching together. His humanity and his divinity together. Both in the one person. He's like us, and yet he's so much more. He's frail, but powerful. He suffers death and rises to life in spectacular demonstration of his victory. Jesus was seen by angels. Now, at this point, it's important to remember that in the Bible, angels refers to messengers. And often, even most of the time, it's the kind of shiny type with wings. But there are some times where angels, the word angels, refers to normal human messengers. And I think this verse is one of them. The context of the statement and the parallel lines, the way that he was seen by angels goes together with he was preached among the nations. It suggests that he's talking about those people who witnessed his vindication by the Spirit, his resurrection, who then took this news to the nations. He was seen by a few, proclaimed to the world. The third part, Jesus was believed on in the world and was taken up in glory. As his kingdom spread on earth, as one believer at a time, coming to repentance and faith, he reigns on his heavenly throne in glory. What the church believes centers on Jesus. It's about him. It's about what he has done. He is the one from whom true godliness springs. He is the only one that lived an example of perfect godliness. And he is the only way that sinners who lack integrity can be made whole, can be forgiven and presented right in God's sight. And we're going to see lots of different aspects about how to live as a church with integrity as we keep reading 1 Timothy. But first and foremost, we have to remember to believe the gospel. We are sinners. We haven't, we can't, and we won't achieve perfect righteousness by our own efforts. We can't be perfectly godly. We can't live the whole and integrated life. Our call to integrity can never be a call to prove our own worth, or a call to self-righteousness, or a call to hide our failings for fear of a tarnished reputation, as some churches have made the terrible choice of trying to do recently. Protecting perpetrators, trying to hide and cover up what they've done. No, instead, whatever we do as God's household, as the church of the living God, as the pillar and foundation of the truth, we do as repentant believers. We do it as sinners, hoping and trusting in Jesus and in his godliness. And whatever we do, this means we're going to do it with humility. Because it's all about him. It's about Jesus. It's not about us. Whatever we do, we're going to do it without boasting, because you and I stand together as repentant believers, as unworthy, undeserving recipients of God's kindness. Whatever we do, we're going to do it expecting to encounter sin in ourselves and in each other. So we're not going to be demoralized and we're not going to be scandalized when we fail. But we're going to make a practice of confessing our sin to God and to each other. And we're going to freely forgive, as we know in Jesus God has forgiven us. And whatever we do, we're going to do it joyfully, celebrating that we're loved by God, that we're included and privileged and enlivened and purposed. We're going to celebrate that we can have freedom from fear and rejoice in a new kind of integrity. An integrity that's not based on us being perfect, but an integrity that's based on us being open about the fact that we're sinners. When what we believe is that we're not perfect, then we don't have to worry about stuffing it up in our lives, because we're pretty good at not being perfect. We can't get out of that classification, can we? There's always going to be consistency. It matters what the church believes. And let me say at this point, if you're not a Christian, it's an open invite. If you see your own lack of integrity, if you know that you don't meet God's standard of perfect righteousness, perfect godliness, please know that the church is exactly where you belong. God's household of forgiven sinners. The church of the living God who dwells in and works through sinners. The pillar and foundation of the truth. The people that are pointing to Jesus as the truth, but also as the way and the life. Friends, repent and believe. Have some integrity. Well, I began by talking about the integrity unit, and I want to come back to that idea to finish. And what if Tom's churches, what if we were being investigated? If there wasn't maybe the NRL integrity unit, but what if there were people around quietly watching, looking at our lives, noticing what we say and do, just kind of taking down evidence of what we believe and comparing if our walk matches up with our talk. Friends, there are people all around us in our communities. There are people in Castlereagh and Cranebrook and Jordan Springs and Ropes Crossing who are subtly and probably even subconsciously conducting investigations. Now, as they're doing that, what are they going to conclude about us? Will they conclude that we have integrity? Would they see our ungodliness and say that we're not as holy as we think we are? Or would they see enough to know that we are openly sinners, trusting in Jesus as the one from whom true godliness springs? Well, it's my prayer that as we continue this series, that God would use his word in 1 Timothy to help us better honour him by what we do and what we believe. And so that we make it easier, a little easier, for the people around us to see us with integrity.